One game is a goddamn supermodel that has only become more glowing and glamorous as the years have gone on. The other is practically a tribute to the past game's experience with the intention of recapturing its magic for both fans old and new. And if we pull up the footage of both games, you can see how strikingly similar both look. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door on the Switch seems to be the perfect trace drawing of the original Manuscript. But despite that, my experience playing both of these games couldn't be more different. So you're probably thinking this remake either has way more under its sleeve than meets the eye, or I just belong in Arkham Asylum. And while the latter is certainly true, there's also some validity to the primary statement, though not in the way you think. For me to really outline this to you though, we need to go back to 2004 and get a good sense of what it was like to play the original in the 2000s and how that altered the trajectory of not just Paper Mario, but beyond. Once upon a time, Paper Mario was never even supposed to become a standalone series. The original Paper Mario actually started off as a sequel to Super Mario RPG, Mario's first true foray into the RPG realm. It was developed by Square Enix, who were then approached to make a proper sequel, but they turned it down, opting to make their own history with an obscure indie title named Final Fantasy VII. Thus, Intelligent Systems eventually took on the duty, and after much brainstorming and tinkering, the game would become Paper Mario, which was a home run success. Picking up where Super Mario RPG left off, Intelligent Systems gave Mario a brand new aesthetic during an era that laid the foundation for so much of Mario's future that was still seen to this day. Paper Mario thrusted the iconic toilet plunger into another sprawling epic adventure unlike any other he'd been in. Paper Mario gave Mario a true world to dive into, full of rich locales, insane civilians, and a huge ass quest to take him through it all. The game truly opened Mario to what felt like infinite amounts of potential, but in a way that still stuck true to the very nature of Mario. One console generation later, and we could get the result of that success: Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. When Nintendo released The Thousand Year Door back in 2004, I was in some corner of the world playing Sonic Heroes proclaiming how much I hate Mario. Simpler times for sure. Little did I know that years later, I'd open up to the toilet-obsessed freak after a string of hits in my eyes, including the all-too-important original Paper Mario. That game showed me that though Mario was an average-looking man and not a too-cool-for-school blue hedgehog, he could still have these grand adventures that feel like prowling novellas with a grip tighter than the anxiety of opening up your test results. I played The Thousand Year Door shortly afterwards, and it quickly became my favorite Mario game of all time. It took everything I loved about the original and dramatized and expanded every aspect possible. I'll never forget being so enamored by a television screen as I finished the game after 40 cumulative hours of play of an adventure that felt like the furthest thing from what I perceived to be a Mario game. I could sit here and truly deep dive into everything I love about this game, but I'm sure it's all stuff you heard before from many other creators before. So to sum it all up, it's a game that continued the mission statement of the original Paper Mario, improving upon every single thing that game did right in the most flashy and star-studded ways possible. The story was bigger, the characters were more intricate, and the gameplay was more addictive than ever. It truly was a culmination of years of freedom and being able to push one of the biggest franchises in the world in directions not seen before, and completely refining and optimizing that. I'll never forget falling in love with Vivian through connecting with her relatable blood-relative relations, tearing up over the discovery of Bobby's trauma, and the shock on my face to see Princess Peach's fate at the end of the game. I would say with so much to love about the game, the core reason I loved The Thousand Year Door is how addictive it felt to explore the world that they had built. I fell in love with all the people I met, the places I visited, and the mechanics built in to maximize the fun in exploring this world. It's not easy to get me to fall in love with a turn-based battle system, as it's not generally my cup of tea, but the simplicity of Mario's at the forefront, hiding the perfect amount of complexity for a novice RPG player like me, just pulled me in like no other RPG game had before, or arguably after, and combining all that crafted this epic narrative that truly stimulated the imagination I had as a kid. This is a game that truly converted me to a long-time Mario fan. The game that showed me Mario had just as much to offer as Sonic, and that books shouldn't be judged by their covers. Over the years, my love for this game only grew, especially after years of playing through the remainder of the franchise and yearning for a lot of things that this game did. Despite all the ways, I actually still enjoyed this franchise with the successive titles. So having such a pure and positive experience with the original, how did this compare to my time with the remake? When that remake got announced for Nintendo Switch, I have to admit, I was definitely taken aback. I mean, I'm a regular consumer of Paper Mario YouTube content, so I've seen all the takes in the world from people on the hopelessness that's been felt with this franchise since Sticker Star and Color Splash splashed and stuck onto the scene. Yeah, that was good. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was actually a lot of lead up to the Thousand Year Doors announcement, and that was through none other than the Origami King. You see, Origami King's announcement is something I do still remember. It was announced randomly in May of 2020 with a release date of just 2 months later. It had this whole aura of, oh, we need some sort of game to come out during the summer and this one is ready to go, so let's just get this out at the last minute. It was also during the pandemic, so I guess that's a factor. The game to me was not nearly as properly hyped as a typical high-profile Nintendo title would be, so it felt like from the start, Nintendo had no confidence in this game's success. But nonetheless, the trailer did show me some promising signs for this game compared to the previous. The storyline, for instance, seemed to take itself a lot more seriously, as seeing Peach as a soulless origami art piece was the closest the series has ever gotten to the creepiness of the Thousand Year Doors ending. The world of the Origami King also seemed to evoke the expansiveness of the Thousand Year Doors, except it looked a lot more close to an open world adventure, a logical next step from the Thousand Year Doors action-adventure tendencies. And Bowser was once again demoted from the main bad guy, as the trailer teased a brand new foe far more dangerous and sinister, a la Peach's transformation. Once Origami King came out, I understand a lot of critiques that people have for it and why it ultimately isn't a return to form that people wanted. But as a standalone product isolated from its predecessors, Origami still does a lot of things that make it brilliant, and it also served as a good indicator of the franchise's direction. In particular, it does some things that echo what the Thousand Year Door did. The biggest thing is probably the partners. While Origami King is significantly lacking in this department compared to Thousand Year Door, it does have a couple partners it develops in ways completely in line with that game. Bobby is the most immediate example to me. Despite his limited screen time, his arc wraps up in a way that evokes a similar sentimental feeling that Bobbery's did for me as a child. Olivia is also very adequately developed throughout the entire game and really would fit right in with the cast of the Thousand Year Door in my eyes. The storyline itself is also overall quite well done, giving the antagonist a properly developed rationale for why he is doing what he is doing that echoes Super Paper Mario's narrative. Beyond that, the world map format of the previous two games was exchanged for a more open-ended format similar to the Thousand Year Door, except much more akin to a formal open world game. The point is, Origami King was edging us closer to what we wanted, and with the announcement of the Thousand Year Door remake, it's clear that this shift in the other direction was something that was building before we even knew it. So you know how Origami King was announced and practically spit out months later? Well, the Thousand Year Door certainly had a more drawn out rollout, being announced as the very last game in a Nintendo Direct back in September of 2023. And this is a slot typically reserved for the most hyped up game in the showcase of Nintendo's upcoming releases. So already we're getting a huge attitude shift when it comes to Paper Mario from Nintendo. And up until the game's release, it was properly promoted across all of Nintendo's socials, with numerous previews and articles out in the months prior to it. Aside from a weird kerfuffle with pre-orders, the Thousand Year Door remake was treated like a mainline Paper Mario title, arguably way more than the Origami King. A remake is always an interesting game to experience for someone who grew up and adored the original. I've been lucky enough to experience speeding through the fences with Battlefield Bikini Bottom's remake. There's not a lot of games I would be foaming at the mouth for when it comes to a remake. The Thousand Year Door wasn't even necessarily one of those games, as to me, it's a game that's aged super well, and really didn't need a remake to bring it up to code. Not in the same way that Battlefield Bikini Bottom really benefited from one, in my opinion. But nonetheless, the Thousand Year Door is my favorite Mario game of all time, and I am still ecstatic that they went through with this project. I will eat the meal that I am provided. This remake is the first day one purchase I've made in a long while. I used to reserve all my games in my local GameStop to secure myself a physical copy on day one. It certainly felt like old times walking out of this game. I surely jumped into the game afterwards. Let's just say I knew myself well enough to ensure that I had no other plans for that weekend. The Thousand Year Door on the Switch is a stunning recreation of an iconic game with little to no fault. It's a remake that perfectly treads the line and maintains what made the original great, and only includes improvements and changes that overall buff up the experience. The game doesn't have a drastic art style change, for instance. All the characters and locales retain the key foundation they had from the original. And yet, more expressions for each of the characters along with more dynamic lighting and details make this game feel brand new all over again in a familiar way. It literally is a fresh coat of paint. Remakes are often at risk of alienating fans of the original due to revamping the visuals too much, and the Thousand Year Door really nails this balance. The most drastic change for this game would certainly be the soundtrack. Every track here is not only remade, but sometimes completely changed from the original in every way besides the melody. Different instruments, synths, interpolating other classic Mario tracks, it certainly doesn't follow the strategy of the visuals, but somehow they managed to make a soundtrack that I love just as much as the originals. And as someone who adores the original soundtrack so much, this is a pretty surprising revelation for me. The way to summarize why I love this remade soundtrack so much is that in a lot of ways, it sounds like the music is celebrating the love and legacy of this game. It's more bombastic, more dynamic, and much more emotionally evoking. It just sounds like they took the original's music and added more on top of it. And it's hard to put into words just how much this soundtrack elevated the nostalgia for this game. It just did, and that is so tough to do with the way they literally changed the fabric of these original songs. I'm sure there's people out there who absolutely prefer the original, but the game makes it very easy to switch to the original sound. So it literally does what a remake should do: provide an updated component, but still give you access to the original. I don't know if I prefer the remake to the original with the soundtrack, but damn, does it come close. But the music to me really helps to summarize how I felt playing this remake. Playing this game really did feel like revisiting an old friend after years of no contact and seeing how amazing and wonderful they still are after all these years. This remake is a party, celebrating the original's legacy and reminding you of a simpler time where you got to experience this game for the very first time. Playing through this remake did feel a lot like when I played the Thousand Year Door as a kid, but it also is an experience that truly differentiates itself in my head. So let's go back to the start of the video where I stated that these were two completely different games. Though they are ultimately knit from the same cloth, both of these games are coming out at completely different times in the world and are both ultimately serving completely different purposes and experiences. The original Thousand Year Door came out when Mario and RPGs were still a relatively new thing. Mario was still transitioning fully to a 3D plane of existence that would consist of more than just a simple upgrade in geometry. Games like the Thousand Year Door were also expanding Mario's scope as a whole, proving to us that Mario could be way more than a journey to Bowser's castle to rescue a princess. The result was a sprawling adventure that surprised you at every corner of just how much excitement and emotion could truly be injected into a Mario game, expanding a child's imagination to places they would have never taken Mario. The remake serves as a reminder as to how much light hindsight has shed on the importance of this game. The Thousand Year Door went down in history as one of Mario's most creative and adventurous endeavors that pushed the boundaries of who Mario is and could be in more ways than one can count. And with the passage of time and observations of Nintendo walking back on this adventurous spirit, it's only become more and more obvious what the Thousand Year Door truly brought to the table and how much Mario needs to be continuously pushing boundaries to stay as popular as he probably always will be. This remake is a celebration, not only of the past, but also of how bright the future can look by celebrating said past and embracing it. Nintendo doesn't seem interested in shunning this era of Mario anymore, and I couldn't be happier. In my last video on the Paper Mario series, I talked at length about how Intelligent Systems and Nintendo didn't seem interested in looking backwards for a long time when it came to Paper Mario. Every game had to be a brand new thing. It was never okay to tread familiar territory in an effort to avoid the series from becoming stagnant. And while I do agree with that sentiment, absolutely ignoring what came before and always trying to reinvent the wheel can result in gross oversights of what people actually love about your series in the first place. If you'll allow me to be obnoxious for a minute here, there's a Taylor Swift song off of her new album, The Torture Ports Department, which you can stream on your favorite streaming service, that actually perfectly encapsulates the balance Nintendo should have had all along when it comes to this. The song is called The Manuscript, and in it, Taylor sings, looking backwards may be the only way to move forward. And I don't believe there's a truer statement that we could ponder at this moment. It is true that Paper Mario may never reach the heights of the Thousand Year Door again if they simply recreated that game over and over again. Let's face it, if all 4 post Thousand Year Door games were simply Thousand Year Door in a different coat of paint, this game wouldn't have the legacy that it ultimately has. I mean, sure, they may all have been good games, but people would be rallying for this franchise to do something different. It truly is the circle of video game life. But that doesn't mean you can't look back at the past, see what worked before, and bring that to the future entwined with whatever new concept you have in your drafts. Like, imagine if Origami King simply just inserted some sort of upgrade system and thus gave its battles a little more purpose. Imagine if they allowed partners to have a slightly larger presence and even gave Bobby a little spice in his appearance. These details gleaned from the past combined with the new concept of Origami King was trying out would have made for a universally acclaimed entry in the series. But you know what? Life is a series of learning experiences, and well, Taylor Swift has a perfect way to describe that from the same song. And at last, she knew what the agony had been for. Though this franchise has gone to hell and back with all the discourse over its direction, it's ultimately led to this beautiful moment where we are truly celebrating and embracing the past and hopefully using this to look forward. Again, hindsight is everything, and the Thousand Year Door could have only had this kind of legacy with everything we've been through. And the reason I truly want to bring this up is because this ultimately sets the stage for the mindset you have going into these 2 games and how that alone is already impacting the way we're experiencing these games. One was a brand new kid on the block we couldn't have even imagined being the legacy they had become. The other comes after years of contention and conflict, offering a little bit of hope to get us through the future. When the remake got announced, though, there were noticeable differences in upgrades for the 20-year-old classic. It was still very clear to me that this was the original Thousand Year Door. Same characters, same locales, just with a very highly welcomed fresh coat of paint. But playing through this remake made me see with 2020 vision that this was a dramatically different experience as a soon-to-be 30-year-old man compared to my 13-year-old self. As a 13-year-old, my biggest concerns were trying to make friends in school, getting A's in all my classes so my dad would buy me a Nintendo Wii, and defending Sonic like the pilled warrior that I was. When I got Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door though, it was a true opening of my mind that Mario was actually a part of a world full of imagination and unlimited potential. It definitely softened me up enough to help me realize that there's nothing wrong with loving both Mario and Sonic, and that I've got to keep a more open mind when it comes to anything in life. You never know if you're closing yourself off to something truly enriching, so give it a chance if the evidence presents itself. But now in 2024, I'm turning 30 years old and it is absolutely terrifying to me. The older I get, the more aware I am at how insane the passage of time is. Like, what do you mean I'll never get to be a teenager again? What do you mean that experience is gone forever? Not that I want to be a teenager again. No. No. Every waking moment, I can feel the bags, my eyes get heavier, the wrinkles take form in my face, and my sense of wonder of the world slowly diminish. But whenever something like the Thousand Year Door remake comes along, it isolates a certain memory, a specific emotion, a clear sense of belonging, and lets that entity blossom throughout my body. The Thousand Year Door remake was truly the warm hug I needed in this day and age. The original opened my mind to the beauty and potential of creativity in a way not many games could do for me today. The remake not only reminds me of that experience, but it also serves as a reminder that although I'll never be a 13-year-old again, that doesn't mean I can't ever tap into that sense of admiration and imagination again. Sure, as an adult, cynicism sort of just comes with the territory, but that doesn't mean you have to be completely void of that childlike wonder. It's great to celebrate the past, and though there are some things you'll never get back, we can still use the past to see what was great and not so great before, and use that to move forward in life. This remake was such a good form of escapism for me, and though I felt sad when it was all over and then returning to my regular old life, it at least instilled a sentimental feeling for me in knowing that this was a great highlight of my past and that can still help me through life in this day and age. I'm still figuring it all out, how to truly feel at peace where I am and be okay where I'm going, but games like this always remind me that that's okay. And that time isn't as linear as it may seem. Looking back does help you move forward in life, as wrong as that sounds. Perhaps a lot of life's joy will from now on stem from celebrating the past. Just look around. Nostalgia is literally an epidemic. I don't know if this will actually be a good thing in the long run, but I love this remake, and maybe I'll just have to leave it there for now. Being an adult certainly has its ups and downs. I definitely have way more to worry about compared to when I was a kid. But this remake certainly helped me feel closer to my 13-year-old self, tapping into some of that positivity he got to experience despite all the stupid teenage crap he was hung up on simultaneously. And I'm just gonna enjoy this for what it is. A great trip down memory lane that I needed way more than I thought as I transitioned out of my 20s. This game has literally been there for me at 2 pivotal moments in my life, and well, that's just legendary behavior. The 1,000-year door, you will always be iconic. And on that note, this is Riders, riding out.